Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021, and we are at the Freeport High School. Not sure if you'll hear it over the mics, but there's some rowdy field hockey going on right outside the door. So if you hear any cheering, it's probably not for us, but we might pretend it is. So we have some new board members joining us this evening, and one of newly elected from Freeport is Colin Cheney. Welcome. And our other board member is not, I believe he's traveling, so we will introduce him at our next board meeting. And Susanna is traveling as well. So everybody else is here, and we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we don't have any minutes this evening. Adjustments to the agenda?
I would like to have one. I'd like to have a brief conversation about what was brought up about the memorials, student or staff memorials going to the policy committee.
Where would you like to put that?
I guess that would be probably new business.
Okay. All right, I just have to write it down, otherwise I'll fly right by it when we get there. All right, so then we will move right on with good news and recognition. And we have our board representative here this evening. Brady, what do you got for us?
All right, Freeport has had most of their fall sports come to an end already. Our football team and cross country are the only team still playing. Football team has their quarterfinal against Poland home on Friday. Field hockey and girls soccer both lost the second round in Yarmouth, and then boys soccer lost in the state semifinals in Yarmouth. Keegan Shea, Alex Graver, and Helen Pope were all selected for the Maine soccer regional all-star team for Class B. And then our cross-country team did win states and will now participate in New England's. And then Eli Spalding was named Junior Golfer of the Year by the Maine Golf Hall of Fame. Next Thursday through Saturday, the musical will be every night at 7, and then Sunday it will be at 2. This year they're doing an assortment of numbers from different musicals, and it should be a lot of fun.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we will move right on to good news from Freeport Middle School. Ray.
Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School. I am going to project behind you. So the theme of tonight's presentation is really around student voice and student choice in the Freeport Middle School. And when we look at kind of voice and choice at our school, we really look at it as, we define that as the student voice as an expression of values, opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that leads to choice and influences decision making. And this happens in a lot of different ways at our school, and I'll quickly go through this. I was in a seventh grade language arts classroom a couple of weeks ago, and the teacher was getting ready to start a reading unit. And she had 8 different books out, and she was doing a book talk for about 2 or 3 minutes on each book, and they're all on the same theme. And then the kids got to choose which book they were going to work in, and then groups were formed based on that. Another part is expeditionary, experiential learning, community-based learning. And this is where the students are kind of presented with a problem, and they need to figure out the different solutions that can come. And I'm going to go into a lot more depth on that after. Fab Friday is something that kind of disappeared during COVID, and this fall we chose not to do it until we get our 6th graders vaccinated, because we're mixing so much and going different places. But the plan is to get Fab Friday back for our winter and spring. With that, we do think that's just a great opportunity for kids to be themselves, explore new things, be with different people. And in the past, we have sent out surveys to kids asking them what activities would you be interested in? And then the teachers look at that and figure out what they want to offer. Then the kids get to pick what they sign up for. And pretty much everyone that hands it back in the first week gets their first or second choice. With that, our clubs and activities, I know you heard a little bit about that last week. They're really fluid. As kids come and ask for more things, we try to add them. If kids aren't signing up for them, we move on to something different. So that's really all based on student interests. One of the World Cultures class did a unit around food, and then they presented their unit to our lunch program, and the lunch program made many of the entrees they designed with the help of the students. Student Advisor Council is something new we're starting, is where we're going to sit down with one person from each advisory in the grade level once a month, just to kind of talk to them, see what they're hearing, see what they're doing. It's our version of student council, where we don't want it elected, we just want to rotate through all kids, so all kids get that opportunity in there. And I know you heard a lot about responsive classroom in the last couple of meetings, so I'm going to go into a little bit of some examples of what that expeditionary, experiential, and community-based learning has been for us, so far this year. These are some of the projects that I'm going to go through in detail for you. These are some pictures of our kids out there. So this week, our kids, our 7th graders, are going to both the Desert of Maine and to Wolf's Neck Farm. And really the question in yellow, how our growing populations impact our ecosystems and how this impacts the growing of food, livestock, and agriculture. And so the kids, have that kind of overarching question as they're going out and visiting these two sites. And they're, done some pre-work, and they'll do a lot more work on solutions later on. And the Desert of Maine and Wolf's Neck couldn't be more opposite. Part of the reason we have the Desert of Maine is because of non-sustainable farming practices and the geology of the area. So they went over there and looked at that and talked to the people that are there and really found out a lot there. And then they also went out to Wolf's Neck Farm, which is, all sustainable farming. So they kind of saw both ends of the spectrum. And, then they're going to look at, what is sustainable for our population and looking forward with that and creating plans around that. This is another project that has been ongoing with Freeport Middle School with our 7th graders, is looking at the green crab. It's an invasive species in Maine, and it's really impacting the clams in there. And we have worked very hard with the local clammers and local shellfish committee and designed boxes to embed, like basically houses for the young clams to live in, so we can help the population of clams grow in that area. What we have found this fall is that there were a lot of crabs in the boxes that we made. That, it did some good, but we wanted to try to do better. So in STEM class, these kids are redesigning and remaking in different ways. So we have several different models that will be put out again in the spring with hopefully, even better success rates. So those are, some examples of some, projects that are hands-on and a lot of choice and direction that the kids can take to come up with their own solutions to the problems that are presented. So really the next steps for us are to continue to build these relationships. Look for more relationships within the community there. For next school year, our hope is that we have a greenhouse on the grounds to go further into this so we can be a part of the solution. With that, we've already received some grant money, and the hope is that the remaining will come out of our regular budget here, but most of it's going to be grant funded. And then the other two are things that I've talked about. So that is a quick little snapshot of what it looks like at Freeport Middle School. All righty. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ray. You got a quick break. All right. So now we will move on to good news from Freeport High School. Jen Golko.
Good evening, Jen Golko from the high school. So we have a little bit of a unique situation in that we have two board representatives, our wonderful representatives who share a lot of our good news. And so I decided to be a little bit specific in the news that we're sharing tonight, and also piggyback on the other principals who have spoken about student voice and choice. But I also had the opportunity last week to share with the board quite a few opportunities that we have for student voice through student leadership. So talking about our new student leadership committee, our student council, our class officers, our board reps, our athletic leaders and club leaders. And so I wasn't going to repeat that tonight. So, but certainly open to any questions that anybody has about those. I wanted to share one specific opportunity that's coming up that we're really looking forward to. I mentioned it briefly last week, but today was the day that we worked on this as an entire faculty. So in the next month, we will be visiting every advisory in the school for all 4 grade levels and having a discussion that our equity committee has designed about personal identity. So kind of without giving away all of the details of the discussion, it's really having a chance for kids to think about their own personal identity and how they interact with personal identities of others that are shared in that room. And so it's going to be either 2 or 3 adults that will be there for that discussion. It will be the advisor. As I shared last week, the 9th grade advisories all have co-advisors. So there's 2 advisors plus 1 of the equity committee members. So there's 7 of us who have done that and engaged in that courageous dialogue workshop. So we're really looking forward to it. It's the first time that we have done this. There are 40 advisories. So it's taking us 4 different school days to do this during advisory. And so today what we did was we ran through it with the entire faculty as if they were the students. So they were able to have that experience and then give feedback. We got great feedback, lots of feedback about some of the different elements of the discussion, and we're really looking forward to how that goes. So tonight, to get a little bit more specific, what I wanted to do was talk about student voice and choice in curriculum, and specifically in ELA. And so here with me tonight is our wonderful department chair for the ELA department, which is Michelle Levitt. So Michelle is going to talk about some of the work that the department has been doing right now.
So thank you for listening. So I'm Michelle Levitt, and so you all have in front of you a pretty comprehensive list of the books that are taught in the English department. So I'm definitely not going to talk about all of them, but I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of what we're doing in the English department right now. So one thing that we have been working on and are continuing to work on is optimizing student engagement. So Jen, in our staff meeting today, talked about this concept of positive personal identity and the need to feel like you belong to a community in order for there to be trust. So as teachers, that's something that we obviously care about and are concerned about a lot, but especially as English teachers, because we have a lot of tough conversations and we want students to be able to feel like they can write freely and openly. So to facilitate that sense of belonging, we have been offering a lot of choice in what students read. And all classes really focus on identity exploration. Most classes write personal narratives and focusing, on the narrative through different lenses, of course, but and also focusing on the bigger life concepts that students can relate to through the books that we read. So I'm just going to highlight a few things. I'm going to focus just on the core classes, just for the sake of time. So starting with 9th grade, this is a focus on world literature. And in 9th grade, students read class novels that offer different perspectives, and then they have choice books that follow up those novels. So for example, students read To Kill a Mockingbird, and they talk about themes of racism, themes of injustice, and then they are offered lit circle books that parallel those themes from different perspectives than To Kill a Mockingbird. Another book that is taught is Persepolis, and this book coincides with Global Studies, the Middle East unit, and it's a graphic novel, and it tells the story of the author's coming of age during the Iranian Revolution, and this is read by all 9th graders. And the narrator is caught in a clash between fundamentalists and Western culture, and students learn about this much more in depth in their social studies class. And it culminates in a Socratic seminar where students answer questions that bridge the learning from ELA to social studies. So those are just a few things from 9th grade. And then skipping ahead to 10th grade. So in this class, students really spend a lot of time exploring identities, talking about coming of age, what it means to fit in. A new book that was introduced last year is Fresh Ink, and this comes from a group called We Need Diverse Books, and it's a collection of short stories centered around why it's important for individuals to be seen and validated, and it represents a really wide variety and range of teen voices and experience, and this book is a jumping off point for students to write their own memoirs. And this unit is really all about making students feel like they are seen and heard and validated. And you can see also in 10th grade, there's a lot of choice units. There's 4 units where students can read different books and talk about them in groups. And also, I wanted to highlight one thing from 10th grade honors English. There's a new literature circle unit this year. Students read Catcher in the Rye, and then they are offered a selection of books, and the goal is to amplify important themes that come out in Catcher in the Rye, things like mental health, grief, loss, parental expectations, family relationships, holding on to childhood. And these literature circle books offer a more 21st century perspective on some of these issues, and coming from multiple voices to analyze the impact of setting. So that is new this year. So that's just something I wanted to mention. And then in 11th grade, this is American literature. So students in this class read about varying American experiences, and what it means to be an American is what we talk about. It explores the question of how one's American experience differs depending on things like social class, ethnicity, race, gender, time periods. The first unit is really about immigration and looking at different experiences of living in America from that perspective. And students during this unit write narratives that express their own American identity and their own perception of what it means to be an American and living in America. And a new unit that was introduced last year that all juniors participate in, AP Language and English 11, is Reading Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. And this is a book where students learn about inequities in the criminal justice system. And this book is paired with, we also watch 13th, which is a Netflix documentary. We read excerpts from How to Be an Anti-Racist, The New Jim Crow, and students have a lot of choice in the articles that they focus on, but all of the articles focus on some aspect of the criminal justice system. And this is paired with the book Just Mercy. And the culmination of this unit is a Socratic seminar where students really, and this is often a pretty tough conversation because the topics are really heavy, but at this point in the unit, students are able to hopefully feel safe to voice some of their thoughts about what they're learning. And that's both English 11 and AP Language. And so 12th grade, students have a lot of choice on the classes that they take. So they can take AP Literature, they can take creative writing or public speaking, or they can take 12th grade English. And this year, they have the dual enrollment option with SMCC where they can get college credit for taking this class. But the big commonality with 12th grade is there's a big focus on the personal narrative. That is, students are really using the skills that they've learned in the younger grades with memoir and narrative writing to write a narrative that really reflects them and how they see themselves as they're, graduating, going out into the world. And teachers spend a lot of time outside of class conferencing with students on this personal narrative. A lot of students use this as their college essay. So that is, in a nutshell, the English department and how we are offering more choice and giving students opportunity to share their voices. Thank you.
Is that it, Jen? Not that that's not fantastic. That was great. Thank you so much. I just didn't want to cut you off if you had more. Okay. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Jen. All right. So we will move on to our first public comment period of the evening. If we have anyone who would like to share, we just ask that you come up to the microphone, tell us your name, where you're from, and please keep comments to 3 minutes. I guess no. Okay. We do not have a report from the superintendent at this meeting, so we will move on to administrator reports. We're starting with Jen. I thought it was you, Ray, but according to Ginny's agenda, we're back to the high school.
Okay, I should learn not to sit down. Just stand up here. I wanted to start by going over just some reflections on my goals from last year, which hopefully you have in front of you. So there were really two things that we focused on last year. One was this idea of inspiring an inclusive mindset in the FHS community, which I know that we had spoken about last year, and all of the principals across the district were working on that. And so I just wanted to highlight, you have a document that I had just put together to just kind of lay out some of the work that we had done, mostly the things that we had done with our entire staff, because that's really where the work focused last year when we were beginning to talk about our equity and inclusion work. And so we started in March, where we were certainly not the first time that we were having conversations, but this was the first time that we were taking our faculty meeting time to have a really specific topic that we wanted to look at and explore. And it was also the first time that we broke into what we call our equity teams. So these are teams that met throughout all of these meetings and continue to meet together this year. So those are the teams. When I explained the advisory activity that we ran through today, that was done in equity teams today. And so we've done some things, watching TED Talks, discussing articles, because really the feedback from staff was that they're looking for concrete strategies about how to engage in challenging conversations, these courageous conversations with each other, but also with students. And so those are the things where we were using resources from Teaching Tolerance about Speak Up at School. And I had shared last week that we were looking at specific scenarios. This was something that the Durham School did as well, where we were talking about scenarios that we had seen and heard in our own school as well as in other schools, and then having a discussion about, this is the situation, how would we respond in the moment? And then there's a video that's called I Am From Here, which is based on schools in Vermont, and it's predominantly interviewing students of color and what's their experience like in Vermont. And we talked a lot about how obviously that's different than our state and our own town, but there is a lot of parallels there, and what are the takeaways that we can hear from those student voices, as well as some of the staff that they had interviewed. And then engaged in some reflection activity, which we also brought back at the beginning of this year to think about, like, what are these small and big picture things? Like, what are some systemic changes that we want to explore, but what are quick things that can happen right away, that we can make changes in our school to create a more equitable environment and this sense of belonging. We developed the student leadership team committee, which I have talked about, and then engaged in the workshops with Kate Stitham, who I shared has done the integrative inquiry work. And so then this year, again, I'm sorry to repeat information from last week. So the 19 people from the district participated in the 2-day workshop, and now the challenge is for us to go out and facilitate conversations and get feedback on that. And so some of those first conversations are going to be, some were today. It was a different flavor in each group, and each one of the equity team committee members who'd participated in the workshop was the one who led that work. And then leading the conversation with students will be another place where they're doing some explicit practice. So this is just some of the work. What this doesn't highlight is the work that departments were doing, starting to look at text, starting to look at curriculum, and all of them having good conversations about like, how do we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in science and math? It's not just a conversation about, English books that we're reading and social studies topics and curriculum, but how are we all looking at that and talking about it? As Dr. Foley has shared, our administrators participated in the Maine Cultural Competence Institute for our school. Charlie Mellon, our assistant principal, participated in that. I participate in the Principals Learning Group, which used to be New England Principals, has now expanded. One of the silver linings it's virtual, so it's gone across the country. So when I'm in a small breakout group, it might be with principals across the country talking about how they're working with, the topic of DEI in their schools. I shared last week that we have postponed, not canceled, the RISE program to replace the Challenge Day, and thinking about what that will look like and how do we create a sustainable program that involves our own students and staff versus bringing in an outside company for just a day. That's something that we're going to continue to work on. And then I shared last week the action steps from the strategic plan that was part of the summer work. So it's certainly ongoing work, but I think our staff was very proud that in the midst of the pandemic and, synchronized teaching and everything that we were doing, we did not say we don't have time for this work. We made time last year and made sure it was a priority. And it's something that we're continuing with more of a focus about student voice this year, whereas last year it was about increasing staff capacity to engage in conversations and make kids feel safe. So I'll talk about how that's going to continue this year. The other goal last year that was definitely a challenge was about analyzing the NWEA data. We gave the NWEA, I think with members of the board who have been here for a while, in my 7 years that I've been here, I've really tried to make sure that if we're going to give the NWEA, that we're working very hard to get as many students as we possibly can in that data, have the students take it carefully and accurately so we can use that data. And so it was a challenge. The first part of the pandemic in 2020, as you know, no one in the district gave the test. And then last year, I would say our data, you can see the numbers. Our ninth graders, we were able to get most of them tested 94%, but we really try to get closer to 100, other than the students whose families have opted them out, or if they are have significant learning disabilities that would impair their ability to take the NWEA test. But 81% of our 11th graders was low. We had a very high opt-out rate. We have never given the NWEA to the 11th graders, feeling like when they start in elementary school and then go all the way to the 10th grade, then we have the SAT, the PSAT, and the AP tests. It's quite a bit of testing for our 11th graders. Brady's nodding. So that data was not as accurate as we would like, and it's also difficult that we did not have growth data. I know that I think some of the other principals chose to do that data by hand and calculate some of the growth data. We struggled with that a little bit. Some kids we didn't have 2 data points for. So what we have decided to do is really focus this year on getting as accurate data and as many kids to test as we possibly can. And we also decided to test our students all of our students in fall and spring. The state is requiring that of juniors, but we have done it for our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders so that we feel like we're going to have very accurate data for the fall administration of the NWEA and then this coming spring. So if I'll kind of shift and go into the goal for this year, that's tied specifically to NWEA, is that we've kept those numbers the same as what my goal was last year. And so we're continuously looking to improve the measurement of growth that we see with students, both for their scores in ELA and in math. The way that we've been working on that is what I outlined on the first place. I gave a lot of specifics about what the math department has been doing. ELA has been working on some of these things as well. Collaborative assessments, looking at data together from formative and summative assessments, working to build their capacity and learn about how to analyze the NWEA data. That's another COVID silver lining, is that the NWEA data workshops used to be on the other side of the country. And then last year with COVID, they made them virtual. So I've been able to attend two, both of which I found very helpful. And then the week after I attended those workshops, I then met with all of our faculty in the PLCs and showed them what I learned so that they're able to run all of the reports and look at the NWEA data in just a more thoughtful way than we've done in the past. So we actually did that this week for all the PLC teams on Monday and Tuesday. So that's what we're hoping to see. We're hoping to see that the number of kids who meet their individual growth target for math will increase to 57% for 9th grade and 51% for the 10th grade. And then for their reading scores, we're hoping to see an increase to 64% for the 9th grade, 56% for the 10th grade. Our achievement scores tend to be on the high end in the 80s and 90 percentile. So it's really growth that we're looking for. And as I shared with the teachers, the older the kids get, the smaller the amount of growth that we're looking for. For the juniors, we're only looking for 1.2 points in reading for them to improve, is what I shared today or yesterday. And so we are still continuing to push them. It's not going to be these like giant jumps that we see in the younger grades of 10 points or 15 points. It's often not that. We did see quite a few students, for multiple reasons, dip down in their data that they took last year during the pandemic. Some of them were taking it remotely at home. Some of them were just struggling overall. And so we might see large jumps. That has been some of the data that I have seen in the last few days, is that we have seen some significant jump up. But when we're looking across a historical data, looking at their 7th grade scores and their 6th grade scores, we see this kind of dip down and then dip back up, and we're able to see if there's some consistency with their historical data. So that's that for the NWEA goal. The other, I'll say one goal is a giant packet of goals. And if everybody had the chance to see that, is, and I mentioned this last week, is that we have our strategic plan that we have had since 2015. We made a 5/6 year because of the pandemic. We've turned it into a 6-year strategic plan. And then this year got together in the summer to create this new version of our strategic plan. And so I'll just kind of highlight some of the things that I didn't talk about last week instead of going through the whole document. On the first page, you'll see what our theory of action is. It's the if-then statement. We feel that if we do these things, then our learners are going to be empowered to learn and grow. The most of these goals, 4 out of the 5, are the same from our strategic plan in the past. The one that's new is equity and inclusion, and that has replaced flexible learning opportunities. It's not that we don't think flexible learning opportunities are important. We think that that is something that is more embedded in our culture here, that we really try to help students access whatever course or interest level, whether that's through the tech program at Region 10 or through online courses of things that we don't offer. In the last year, we have significantly expanded our online offerings. And knowing that online learning is not the best learning for some kids, for others, they have found that they really thrive with that. And we're seeing so many of the colleges are going to the option of some online classes and a mixture of both. I've often said to students, it's a great opportunity to try a fully online class here for free, and then decide whether you are an online learner or not. And so those are the things that we'll continue to offer. But that has come off because we felt it was really important to put equity and inclusion on here as one of our main goals. So the way that this document is structured is that we have these 5 major goal areas. Then every goal has long-term objectives of how we're hoping to achieve that goal in the next 5 years. And then below that, there's yearly action steps. So this is how we've done this since 2015. And the leadership team and the department chairs come together every summer. We do 3 days in the summer, 3 full days, to look at, reflect on the work we've done from the year before, and then decide on the action steps for the coming school year. And so some action steps actually continue. Some of these have been on the strategic plan action steps, the yearly documents, for multiple years, because they're just things that are, an iterative process that doesn't end in 1 year. Others come off so that other action steps can be prioritized. So at the last board meeting last week, I shared really that the goal and the action steps for equity and inclusion, for community connections, and support for learning and growth. So tonight I'm going to focus on the other two, which is engaging in instruction and purposeful assessment. That those are the two that we didn't talk about last week. So you can kind of see that the way that this is, the words that are in bold, hopefully kind of jump off the page of those are the major things that we are looking for. Research-based instructional methods, reflection and revision of instructional planning, opportunities that we design for a wide variety of learning opportunities, differentiation strategies for the range of learners that we have in a classroom, and then this relearning and reteaching process, which is tied to reassessment, which we've been working on for the last 7 years. So the way that we're hoping to the specific steps that we're hoping to take this year, one is that we are creating a digital library for our curriculum plans. It's just in the digital age, it's a blessing and a curse that we have them in so many different places. And we've found that when they are in one place, it really supports collaboration. So that it also supports our new teachers. So when they come in, they know exactly what the work has been done for the Algebra 1 class or for the ELA 11 class. And it's just working on, sounds like a minor step, but it's one of those things that we're kind of chasing our tail sometimes because we have so many digital documents. All of our courses, we've been working again for the last few years on year-long plans. So that's an outline of the standards, the units, the topics, and the assessment. It's kind of like that roadmap for the course. We have those in place, and they're constantly being revised every year for most of our kind of graduation required courses. And so the next step is to have them to create them for the courses where it doesn't exist. Some of the elective courses or some of the newer courses that have come on. So those are things that our staff at the high school typically work on in the summer and then reflect on throughout the year. And so now we're trying to make time for those to be built throughout the year. One thing that we have been focused on for the last 2 years, we're always looking at research-based instructional strategies because brain research and how kids learn changes all the time. So one thing that we have worked really hard on and continue to work on is cognitive engagement. And so what that looks like for the board, I talked about this with the board members who came for a walkthrough last week, is that this is strategies that teachers implement to make sure that each and every kid in that room is wrestling with the task or the question at hand. So there's nobody who can kind of hide out in the back of the room with their pen ready and they look like a great student, but they're just waiting for Dr. Foley to answer the question, because she'll talk quickly. And so that all of the teachers in all of the departments are working on what strategies do we implement that force kids to demonstrate that they are wrestling with that question, not just about taking good notes and participation. They've learned a lot, the staff, we've talked a lot about what's the difference between cognitive engagement and participation, that those are two different things. So that's something that we're constantly working on, and that our PLD day that's coming up in November and our faculty meeting in December are that's going to be a major part of our focus. I've also shared that we do something here called Instructional Rounds. We have not done that in the last 2 years due to COVID, which is disappointing. But that is when a team of our teachers, they get together, they talk about observing classes, then they go out and they observe portions of classes in teams. They take notes, not about the specific teacher, but about patterns that they're seeing across the school. And then they come all back together and debrief what they saw. So this time our focus is going to be cognitive engagement. So then we're able to, when we debrief, to see like, how often are we seeing this? Are we seeing this in all classes, some classes, very few? The last time that we went in, we had a different focus. We've done instructional rounds twice here. We were planning on it for March of 2020, and then again for the next March of 2021. So now it will likely be February. That's probably the time that we're banking on, and nothing is going to get in the way of that. I've just decided that. So that's something that we'll continue to work on. Then the last couple on here. The department chairs are working on this concept of that the written curriculum that we're talking about, that year-long plan, is actually what's being taught in classes. And so that students have a common experience in the same course, regardless of the teacher that they have. So teachers have their individual style, but the standards and what they're teaching should be the same. They should all come out of Algebra 2 or Earth Science or Latin 3 with the same concept, no matter who their teacher is, and standards. And then something we continue to talk about is the difference between reassessment and relearning and reteaching, that it's not a do-over. It's not just about giving students a chance to retake something. It's about, some students need more time to learn a concept and a different way to demonstrate their understanding. And so what is happening in between? That we're not just saying, come back on Thursday and retake this, that it's something happening that the student has to do and that the teacher is doing in between. And those conversations are ongoing. And then the last one about strengthening collaboration efforts. This is another one that we're constantly working on, but something specific that we've done is we have what I would call 2 true co-taught classes this year, which is one ELA 9 section and one Global Studies 9th grade Social Studies section. So that is where a special education teacher is in there, not to support the few students with an IEP in that room. There are 2 teachers in that room, and they are leading instruction together, and they are planning together, and they are grading together. They took a workshop over the summer. I know that Ray has some teachers working on this as well, because they all did the training together. And so it takes an incredible amount of time and collaboration to do that well. And so we're starting slowly with these 2 classes. Our special ed teachers still go into tons and tons of classes, but this is the one where they're really trying to have students view them as 2 teachers who are teaching this class. So then moving on to purposeful assessments. Some of these are things that we've continuously worked on, about this range of purposeful assessments, that they look very, very different from class to class. Anything from a traditional pen and paper test or exam, all the way to what Michelle had referenced, a Socratic seminar, which is where the teacher basically does not speak, and the students are graded on their preparation for that coming in, what they've done to do the readings, to prepare the questions, and then how they engage in that discussion with one another. So teachers continue to work on that. Calibrating scoring of student work so that there's some similarity in how students are being scored, even with 2 different teachers. And then using the data that we get from assessments is something that we're constantly working on. So teachers, again, this is one carried over from our previous strategic plan. They will be continuing to work on 2 really at least 2. So when I say 2 unit plans, that means because in the years past, they've worked on 2 others and 2 others and 2 others. So some teachers have done this for many, many units, but it's about having these really well-planned units that they get feedback on as well. Something that's new, the second bullet there, is that we are asking teachers with a common course to develop at least one common summative assessment this year. So we've talked about that in past. Some departments are way far ahead on that. Other departments are not. So they might collaborate on the standards, but they've assessed kids in different ways. And so we're moving towards having more common assessments because it helps students make sure they're having a common experience in 2 different classes, but also can spark an incredible amount of collaboration by looking at the data, planning the lessons that lead up to it, and then the follow-up, whatever happens based on the data that they get. And then our teachers meet in PLC teams every other day again this year for 40 minutes. That was something that stopped in the pandemic, so we're happy to have that back. And they have at least one, most people have at least one collaborative teacher. So the Algebra 1 teachers are together, the biology teachers are together, so that they have this common planning time. And there's lots of things that they're working on, but specifically this year, they're going to share data that they get from a formative assessment. So they'll say, I gave this quiz. Here's where the students did well. Here's what I'm going to do next. And demonstrate a lesson plan that they have made based on that data. So this is the lesson that I'm going to do because this is the data that I got from that assessment. So Dr. Foley said it's an ambitious plan with lots of action steps. But I think something that's important to note is that there's lots of places where we're working on these things. So like I said, our teachers have PLCs every other day, which is unique. We're very grateful for that time. They have department meetings at least twice a month, so after school, so they work there. Some of our faculty meetings are dedicated to this, and then our PLD days are dedicated to this as well. So we're looking forward to this work, and a lot of this is already started and in motion. So take any questions.
Questions for Jen? Bali.
Hey, Jen, thank you so much. Now I want to see it all. I missed the opportunity, so if there's another opportunity, I would love to know about it. It is. Is that better? Okay. So wonderful work. I'm really excited about it. I have a couple of questions. You just ran through a lot of great information, but a few things that stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned differentiation is one of the things that you guys are trying to provide more of.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give some examples, just concrete examples of how differentiation happens in a given class?
Sure. So one of the things that we did with all of the PLC teams in the last 2 days was I asked everybody to pull their literacy scores from the NWEA that we just took. There's one report that I think visually is very helpful, is that it takes all of the kids that are in one class and puts them on a span of where they land. And we talk about how NWEA is just one data point. Some students don't test well. Some students test very well or guess very well. And so, But when you look at historical data, you can kind of get a sense of that if this student has performed at this level over time. And so we talked about that. For example, we pulled an ELA 9 class where there was a huge range of kids in that room. And so we talked about, actually next week's PLCs is when teachers will start to share some of the strategies that they have done. But we talked about in any classroom, in any department. Giving one example of something is having choice in the levels, in the Lexile level of an article. So say they're reading something on photosynthesis, or they're reading something about the geography in the Middle East. Is that one concrete strategy is that they'll have 3 articles to choose from at different Lexile levels. And our librarian is masterful at helping us determine Lexile readability levels of the text that we have. Plus, there's tons of online resources that help with that. And so a teacher might say, you can choose, that you can self-select. I've heard one teacher, this was in my previous school, called it mild, medium, and spicy. So this is a mild, medium, and spicy article, and it's up to you which one you want to push yourself to read. Other teachers would say, Jen, I think this is the best article for you to read, and I'm actually deciding for them. So the content of what we're talking about, we can all come back in the same class and have that discussion about the topic, but we've read it at a level that's accessible for us. Another concrete strategy would be these online resources that we have. We have a program called Read Write that goes on kids' laptops that helps them to simplify an article or a text that they're reading. And now, technology is such a huge help for some of these things that kids have access to audiobooks. They can dictate things if they're a struggling writer. So those are some of the strategies that we talk about that kids can share, as well as talking about how are we pushing our strongest students to make sure that they're being challenged. So they're reading something at a much higher level than the other kids in class. So it's something that we're constantly working on because we have the challenge of, there would be some content areas, like if you are talking about prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells in biology, there's really no other way to say that, and so sometimes it's about pre-teaching the vocabulary and things like that. But and then of course we say a lot that we differentiate through our course selection, so that kids have an access to such a huge range of classes for a small school here, that's another way that's a different type of way that we differentiate.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear about the strategies that are being used in the classrooms across the board, and especially in the social studies department, because there are no honors classes. Hopefully this is taken even a farther step in that department, just to accommodate the different learning abilities of the different kids who attend those classes.
Yeah, and it's only 9th and 10th grade that we don't have honors classes for social studies. Then we move into AP selections for the 11th and 12th graders.
Thanks.
Beth.
You were mentioning that the NWE testing for the 9th and 10th graders you're going to be doing twice a year. Does that replace something else that was there, or was there just no testing, or just once a year? What was it before?
So just for this year, we are testing our 9th and 10th graders in the fall. Moving forward, our plan is to go back to spring testing. And so we have never tested our 9th graders in the fall for anything. Unless they're a student with an IEP that we really want to measure growth. And so if their IEP goals are tied to reading or math, then we'll obviously use some sort of test, and sometimes that's the NWEA. Our 10th graders take the PSAT. So that is a challenge of we're getting this data that's so helpful to us from the NWEA, but we're competing with other tests at the time of year. And so that was challenging this year. Our 10th and 11th graders all took the PSAT, and then a week later or a couple days later took the NWEA. The same thing is going to happen in the spring, because it's the time of the SAT and the AP test. The difference is that now the SAT is optional, and that this is our state test for juniors. But the 9th and 10th graders, we feel that once we have this data for this year, then we'll be able to go back to spring to reduce the testing a little bit.
Maddie.
Say my name twice for a reason.
I didn't have the mic.
Oh, okay. I'm hearing a lot. Thank you so much. Yeah, it is an ambitious plan for the teachers, for sure. I love hearing the work that you're doing with the teachers, because it sounds like you're really building a culture of continuous evolution in teaching practices, which maybe this is just my personal experience or bias in my own education, but I feel like high school wasn't necessarily the place where that occurred in my own experience. So it sounds really exciting. I'm curious about how that, are the teachers as excited as you sound to present it and as I feel about hearing it, or are there some hurdles to overcome there in terms of approaching material that they may be years familiar with in new ways?
I mean, I think that there's always like this mixture of excited about learning. I think so many of our teachers are naturally inquisitive, and they are learners and would describe themselves as learners. And then it's balancing it with all of the things that are happening at the same time. We are experiencing more challenges with our kids with mental health in the last 2 years than we have in the past. And so it's this balance of all of the things that are on their plate. We are, as I shared last week, we are having more challenges with protocols with COVID and having students follow them. We did not have challenges with it last year, and this year it's been a real struggle, I think. And so that's something that the teachers also have on their plate. The pace of this year feels very fast, because even with all of the challenges of last year with synchronous learning, and they pushed themselves so much in how they were learning to use new technology, the pace was slower last year because we went maroon, white, and then you might not see a class for a week again. And so I can't speak for them about how excited they are. I can say that the leadership team and the department chairs are the ones who make this and then present it, and that it's something we've been working with for 7 years. And so it's this idea of continual growth that we talk about a lot. I think the challenge is just always finding the time. An example would be that some of our teachers collaborate with two or three partners, and so they might collaborate with the Algebra 2 teacher as well as with the quantitative reasoning teacher, and they have to find time to do both of those things. So but I think in general our staff has done an outstanding job of constantly learning and constantly pushing themselves.
Vali?
Thank you. Jen, a question about the reassessments and what you mentioned, that there's opportunity for students to demonstrate in different ways new learning that they achieve after the assessment. Do they have to retake? Could you describe what different kinds of methods are used for assessing the students other than the written exam that everyone gets? Mm-hmm. And also, if there are different opportunities to show learning, is there a reason why we wait until they have to retake to give them the opportunity to show learning in different ways?
So I'll kind of answer your last question first. A lot of teachers are putting in choice for assessments right from the beginning. Not everybody, but it depends on the class. But so sometimes there's choice right there in the first iteration of whatever the assessment is. But an example would be, the math department has done test corrections for 1 million years. And so a difference is now that some of the math teachers, when it's not about just going back and correcting your test, because theoretically I can just go find a friend who did better on that test than I did and then look at their corrections and then make my corrections, which is probably something I would have done. Brady's nodding. I'm right there with you. But so now there's some math teachers where you have to do the correction and then you have to do a narrative of what your steps were. What steps did you take that you mistook? And then what have you now realized that you need to do with your problem solving to change that? I don't know, Brady, if you were nodding, if you want to comment.
In my calculus class last year, that's how we did reassessments. You had to redo the question and then on the right half of the page, talk through your steps and your thinking and explain why what you did the first time was wrong and then why what you're doing now is different and why it's right.
And a lot of teachers have a policy of you can't reassess until you've done all the practice work. So you can't take that reassessment until you have demonstrated that you've done all of this practice work. Whereas theoretically, in the first iteration of it, you could have skipped some assignments and then you do the assessment and you do fine and you don't want a reassessment. But so some of the teachers have put that in place, and then they're using callback time to go over those assignments that are happening before the reassessment. But that's something that people are still working on, because I think, to Maddie's question, it's manageability. Because you're still moving on with the new content. And so one thing that's really hard for teachers is the stream of work that's coming in at different times. And people are still just trying to figure out what's a system that works.
So are there any accommodations, say, for a verbal student versus one who can express him or herself in the written form better? Are those kinds of choices available to students?
Yeah, so that's where the technology has really come into play. I mean, there's so much that kids can actually do on their phones, but also on their laptops. So speech to text is something that any student can use. The audiobooks are things that any student can access. And so our librarian, Heidi Cook, often sends them out to just say, hey, this is a reminder. We have the audiobooks. When kids come in as a full class to the library, she presents books that they can choose and then also shows them how to access all the audiobooks. So those are things, it's instead of an accommodation, it's things that we're offering to all students, because it could just be preference.
And that includes assessments too, or not? Or is just for the work leading up to the assessment?
Depends. So typing, because our kids are one-to-one, they can use speech to text at any time that they want. So if they were if there are students, it's more common that you would see this with students who have an IEP, who have an accommodation that's explicit, that says something like they're speaking their answers and a scribe is writing them down. Sometimes you might see that in the general population, but less so. I think sometimes just for the logistics of it.
Maddie? See, I was just pre-saying it last time. I knew you'd have enough.
I want to go back to sort of follow up on last week's conversation and some of the stuff you alluded to, and I didn't mind you repeating it at all. I don't think you told us last week that the RISE program was possibly going to come back. I thought it was not going to happen at all, so I'm pleased to hear that that's still something that's hopefully in the works. As you know, I was a big fan of past programming where we did have a lot of community engagement and the building of a culture of inclusion, and I felt that that's been a real loss. The last kids who have had that are graduating this year. But I'm so heartened to hear everything that you shared around building a culture of belonging. And I can really see from your presentation to us tonight how you're striving to build something. Last week you said long-standing and impactful, which was one of the problems with that previous programming, is that we didn't know how to keep it active in the culture. So again, that sounds aspirational. It's right up my alley. That's fantastic. It's what I love to see the high school striving for. It feels like in the short term, having it in the advisory, that feels tough. I do want to say the personal identity work, Julie Nickerson did that same work, I think, with her teachers. And I actually reached out to her and she sent it to me, and I did it with the board that I'm on, and that's really good. So I'm psyched you're bringing that to students. But it feels like a big ask to build something really meaningful just in that advisory. So I would just love to hear more your strategic focus around this. Like, how do you make something that is just going to live in advisory for the time being until RISE comes in? How do you see that really impacting the culture? It's a big question, but I just would love to hear you riff on it a little.
Yeah, I think that it's not to say that it lives in advisory. I think what it is, and the RISE program is only going to be a part. We're not waiting for the RISE program. The RISE program is hopefully going to be something that helps our students in a different way, in the way that Challenge Day did, where you take a full day and bring them together, and there's student facilitators and things like that. That's the idea of the RISE program. And last week, I'm sorry if that was the impression. It's not that it's gone forever. It's that, if you remember what I said, a big part of our creation of this RISE program was a collaboration between 5 local schools, and we can't do that right now. And that's financial reasons and for support and learning. That was supposed to be the kids and staff who are trained at Greeley will be able to come over here and support our kids and staff, and we'll be able to go over there. That's kind of the creation of it. That's a big part of why it's been put on hold. Also because the other principals we all agreed we didn't have the capacity to do that last year. And now Kate does not have the capacity to do that because she's focused on equity trainings like she did for us. And so, the idea is that when we came up with this as a way to start and then make sure that each and every student has the opportunity to participate in that. I say that, each and every, and the Region 10 kids are not going to be able to be a part of that. That one of the biggest sacrifices that Region 10 kids make, they might not think it was a sacrifice because they had to stay today and they weren't that happy about it, is that they don't go to advisory, because the kids who leave in the afternoon, eat lunch, and then go. They're in advisory for 10 minutes. And then the kids who are in Region 10 in the morning come back at 11, and by the time they walk to advisory, it's about 15 minutes that they're there. So it's very hard for them to walk into the middle of something. So today we did the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. We did not have them go back because we felt like that would be very awkward for them. It's awkward for them to walk into a guest speaker, things like that. That is one of those challenges that I don't think there's a solution, because we have 3 schools coming together with their schedules. And so we have to figure out a different way to have those kids engage. Beyond the Region 10 kids, doing it in advisory ensures that everyone is getting this conversation as a basis, because some might be in Michelle Levitt's English 11. She teaches that English 11 class where they're reading Just Mercy, and she also teaches AP and then has the Socratic seminar, but not every student's in that class. And their Socratic seminar and their Socratic seminar is led by students, so it depends on the participants of how deep they go. And so they may or may not be a part of those conversations. And so we wanted to ensure that we kind of kick off this idea of personal identity that then goes out to classrooms, that then is, becomes this part of conversations that we have on a more regular basis in all of the different classes. So the idea that we really took from Carmen from Nwea, who did the equity audit, she led our workshop in October. And I shared with the staff, and we were talking today, that was a big nugget that we took from that training, was that you cannot have these difficult conversations with kids until they have positive personal identity, that they feel that they have a seat at the table, that they're seen and heard at our school. And so we feel like that's going to be our first step. And then we go into these more difficult conversations. As we expand the text that we're reading, the conversations are changing. As the population of students of color increases here, that's changing the conversation. So I don't think that the idea is for it to stay in advisory. It's just a way to make sure every kid is exposed to this idea, concept, and conversation. I think the conversations today, there were 6 groups that did it, were very, very different. And that's what it's going to look like in advisory. You're getting a preview, Brady, so don't spill it. But so, Brady is going to help his group have a really deep and meaningful conversation. I also shared last week that as much as we would love kids to be passionate about social emotional learning at the high school level, not all of them are. Not all of them are that excited to talk about their personal identity, but some are. Some love to talk about themselves. And so, I think it's going to be a range of what those discussions look like. And then the part I didn't share is that we now have student advisory leaders. I shared that last week. There's one student from every advisory. It's going to be up to those kids about what comes next. So all of those kids will experience this meeting in advisory, and then they are planning the next meeting. So what they do in 9th grade might be different than 12th grade, because the 10 9th grade leaders are going to come together with adult support and decide what comes next. And we'll see where this goes. Hope that helps a little.
That helps a lot. Thank you. I just really like hearing sort of the strategic overview. It helps me feel really hopeful that this is something that's going to be long-standing and continuing and evolving, and not just sort of a tactical maneuver that checks a box. So I appreciate it very much.
I will also say that the goal that the equity committee came up with that we presented to the staff today, I wish I had brought the exact wording of the goal, but the idea of the goal is that because there's so many different directions that you can go with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, we really wanted something tangible. And the goal is for students and staff to be able to engage in inclusive conversations with people from diverse perspectives. And I said our whole country is having a hard time doing that right now. And so that is something that we feel like if we could make some gains there for people to be able to just listen to one another right now. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this term cancel culture, where you just cancel out somebody who doesn't agree with you and you defriend them and you don't listen to them. And so we have to fight against that and say, that this is a big part of how we will move forward in a better and more positive way, is if we can at least listen. So that's the goal, the big, big goal.
Molly.
Just a quick follow-up. I think what you're doing is great, just laying the foundation during advisory. But I hear Maddie when she says that to be able to access the more deep personal work, it may be necessary to have periods of time that are longer and devoted specifically for that. Along the same lines as what they were saying last week, that you can do deep mental work and then send kids to the classroom. Mm-hmm. You may run into that issue that if you have 40 minutes, kids are not really going to go deep. They may lay the foundation, but then if there's ever an opportunity to give them a full day or a half a day to really get immersed and feel safe going deep, that's probably the best combination.
Colin.
Thanks so much for this. This is, as other folks have said, this is an ambitious plan, but I'm really admire it and excited about what you're presenting. I guess a little bit of a follow-up question on the equity and inclusion work, especially since this is a 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious how you've been thinking about how to evaluate progress or change. I'm not sure if those are even the right words for it, but what happens over the 5-year period based on the action items within those different years. In other words, how does the at an administrative level, how do you understand that? How do the teachers themselves also understand what is happening and how 2022 was different from 2021, but also how the students themselves are also perhaps having a little bit of a sense of, okay, I'm a senior now. I think I have more tools, or I know that I'm better equipped to be able to engage in this conversation than I was 4 years ago. So just love your thoughts about that.
I think that, a lot of that is going to come from student feedback and from staff feedback, over the course of the years of, thinking about how often our kids having the opportunity to either voice their opinion or their concern, similar to what Ray had talked about how we see student voice. And I think we don't have an exact measurement yet. I mean, that's what we do each summer is think about the work that we've done. And we started with really having the staff feel like they had more tools. I think Charlie and I are in classrooms often through the PEPG process. And so we're able to, my hope is that we're able to see this over time. It might be that we, do some really targeted observations with teams to see, like, when is this happening? One of the things that I love to do every year, I go to the, when they do the Socratic seminar for Persepolis, and I see one Socratic seminar in every one of the 9th grade English and social studies teachers. And I think that's a place where anecdotally, then that team all comes together, is we can see how deep are kids going into this conversation? Are we seeing that start to change? There's another kind of program in its infancy that Dr. Foley and I are working on with an outside person about bringing in groups together, groups of students, and having that be training other peers to lead those conversations, and then collect some of that data and use that data to inform how we move forward. So I think that those are the things hopefully we're seeing, giving students those opportunities to give feedback and then actually seeing it live and in the classrooms. I think that would be a place. And the last place I would say is in those student leadership. We have different opportunities for student leaders. What are they talking about? How do they feel that they're contributing? Is their work shifting? Because some of those, like the Student Leadership Committee, are just in their infancy. So hopefully that helps.
Definitely, that's great. Just very excited for the work and excited to hear more.
Thanks.
Anything else for Jen? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right. Hopefully we've given Ray enough of a break.
Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School. I think everyone has a copy of the goals in front of you. The first page of the goals are last year's, and I'm not sure if it's an advantage or a disadvantage to be the last principal to go with it, because I know a lot of this you've heard from a lot of other principals around the equity, diversity, and inclusion. Last year, we kind of kicked this off with very similar to what I talked to you about in that 7th grade classroom where the teacher presented 8 books. We presented 6 or 8 books, I can't remember how many, all around different diversity topics. And and we presented them to the staff, and the staff picked which book they wanted, and we created some book groups to have discussions and start with that. It's trying to model that same choice we want for students with teachers as well. So that's really how we kicked things off last year. We spent quite a bit of time in those discussion groups and working our way through there. We also created an equity committee that has started to help plan the work last year, and really, as we're taking much deeper steps into it this year, really leading the work here with that. And when I get into, actually, I think it's easier to kind of just skip to next year's goal because it's in here again. If you look at where we're going with it this year, we're kind of continuing on to where we were last year. Jen had talked to you, and all the principals have talked to you about the Courageous Conversations training that we all had staff doing. That is our equity team that has helped kind of creating the plan and leading different discussions, leading different planning with that. And an interesting part of what they've really helped me with is talking about building the trust amongst staff and the mindfulness activities through that, and the different trust building and team building activities to help get those conversations to happen in an easier way and for people to feel trusted with that. So that was a really nice addition that wasn't part of the training, but the teachers really felt it was needed. So that's been a part of what we're doing this year as well. With that, this year we've already had Equity Maine in to talk about with the staff to really give a better understanding is, pronouns in names of students, really to give them an understanding from the student's perspective, and around making all kids feel comfortable and safe and ready to learn in our school. And it was really, they did an excellent job, and it was very well received by our staff with that. They are coming back to do some more trainings with us. So we have a combination of trainings coming in, different discussions, different PD that will happen in there. Maddie, you mentioned about the work that Julie did. That's the same work that they did with us in one of the trainings. That is something that will happen on the half day when we are off on Thursday. I think most buildings are all doing that to one way or the other. So I think that what you've heard from me, if one of the other building principals didn't say it, it's probably happening something similar there. And if I didn't say it and they said it, it's probably happening somewhat similar way, because this is a topic that we collaborate quite a bit on. And then the one thing, Colin, I just wanted to follow up on your question for Jen around kind of that data collection and like, how do you know you're going in the right direction? And I think that that's a great question. I really had to kind of think about that this year when I was putting this together. Like, how do we know that we're making the progress that we think we're making or we want to make? And it's really a combination of different student surveys, different teacher surveys, getting feedback from them, and in the office, the issues that we're seeing are very telling of what's going on in the school. With it, a couple of weeks ago, had some students do a great job calling some kids on some language that shouldn't be said. Thrilled that these kids felt comfortable to do it. Disheartened that it was said. So which way do I look at it as, is it a step forward or a step backwards? But like those are the things that are very telling on where we are with it. And then the other is, I think the mantra that I really try to use with all the staff and the students and anyone that asks a question, we really want to create an environment that all kids feel safe and comfortable and ready to learn. And that's kind of the language that they hear consistently from me. So that is the where we are with the equity, diversion, and inclusion. And now I'll skip back to last year's goal around synchronous learning, which seems so long ago. When I looked this up this year, that I was presenting this, like, really, I'm presenting synchronous learning? But yes, that was our goal, and holy cow, was it a lot of time and a lot of work. It really was, and I'm thrilled that we are not there again. And really thrilled with what we were able to do and keep readjusting, what it looked like for kids, keep readjusting the PD and professional development that we needed for teachers. As you remember, we did not hire a math coach last year. We hired a technology specialist for the two middle schools. And I really can't imagine going through it without him. He did an absolutely amazing job, and he would be from modeling in classrooms to helping with technology needs for teachers, to co-teaching with teachers, to just meeting every teacher where they are. Like if some teachers are light years ahead of others, and he really just did an amazing job of meeting teachers where they are with that. And there were a lot of surveys that went to parents, kids, teachers to really help us stay focused and moving forward with that. And then the data plan, I was a little, surprised at the data coming back because if you look at the bottom corner there, the 19th NWEA growth for our school, and growth, NWEA is set mathematically, so it's 50%. Make 50% don't. So they say if you're in the 40 to 60 window, you're right where you should be. In the 18-19 school year, the last full school year we had, we were at 63.3% of our students made their growth goals, which is great. Outside of that window you're supposed to be in. And this past year, basically the same, a hair higher, but basically the same. And we all know last year did not look anything like 18-19. So I was absolutely thrilled that that's where that data ended up. And now on to, then the other thing I just want to talk about, the stress level of teachers. That was a huge part of this, and managing that, and the coach and team leaders did a great job of this. On the district surveys, our teachers filled out that they had the lowest stress levels around synchronous learning of any of the schools that did it. Some of the schools, the younger schools that didn't do it, they had less stress around synchronous learning than we did, but that's understandable. I had less stress about it too than the teachers did. But yeah, so I was very pleased with that, the stress level of our teachers, and it made me feel like we were in a good place with that. And now on to responsive classroom. And I know you've heard a ton from all the elementary principals, and it was part of yesterday's last week's presentation. So we've had advisory for a number of years. We first brought it in with two authors, Wong and Wong, and it was kind of one set of language and one set of routines. And then when Emily Grimm was the vice principal at our school, she kind of helped us lead from that program to this program called Developmental Designs. And Developmental Designs has kind of gone out, and Responsive Classroom has expanded up to the middle level. So when Responsive Classroom expanded up to the middle level, which it wasn't when we put in Developmental Designs, we really wanted to hop on board so that the kids are getting the same language K through 8 and the same expectations with that. So a number of staff were trained this summer. We were working on kind of train the trainer, working with different activities. This past staff meeting was doing 4 different responsive classroom activities, team building type things with our staff that different people led with that. And then next year in the summer, the hope is to get even more people trained at a higher level so we can continue to build on that. All those are the kind of the building overarching goals. Every department also has goals they're working on. Like the math department is really working on bringing the activities and the discourse back, because when we were every other day, what was really cut was the activity side of the lesson. Most lessons are a 2-day lesson. The first lesson being the direct instruction part, and the second part of the lesson being the activity and applying it. And to kind of be able to hit all of the curriculum for the year, we really had to cut out some of the activities to do that. So we're working on bringing that back and really working on the discourse. And I was in a 6th grade math class today where they were in like 6 different groups, and they were all standing and talking and had these things out. And it was great. Like that was the discourse that I've been, that really wanted to see. Or, we want to make sure that we have at high levels. Language arts, really focusing on that stamina. We're seeing that the stamina for reading and writing isn't where we want it to be. I had a conversation with a 6th grade parent today about we really need to work on your child's writing stamina. They are not writing enough for what we would expect out of a 6th grader. and that's just something we're working on. Science, really working on the inquiry-based learning and a lot of the stuff that you saw here, that questions and then researching and really fine-tuning what we're doing in science, because those of you that have kids that came through, it's a little bit different. We have STEM at every grade as part of a core content class. So your children just experienced it as 8th grade. Your child will experience all 3 grades. In 6th grade, it's really computer-based coding and technology with it. The 7th grade is more the life science and applying, like you saw there. And the 8th grade is the more the physical science with that. And social studies, I know you've heard a lot of times about the district goal around that. So that's really what our teaching teams are doing. Questions?
Questions for Ray? Jen?
Ray, that was great. Thank you. But you brought up an interesting thing when you were just talking about the 6th grade parent and talking about stamina, and it makes me wonder. I mean, my kids, obviously, I only have one left who's a senior. So in the younger grades, especially in middle school, is there still a lot of kind of pen to paper writing and actually sitting and reading, paper books and so
Yeah.
do you
So
think
yes.
that's a lot of that seems to be an interesting stamina thing when now we're so technology based?
So reading paper books, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's just, that strong feeling that we got to be reading books.
Right.
In other content areas, there is more reading on the computer and doing things, but in the language arts class, it's still paper books. In the writing, I would say it's a mix. There's definitely a lot of writing on the computers, and we're talking stamina in that. But there's also handwritten journals in a lot of classes that they are still doing that. And, one of the things when you think about it is you ask any kid after an AP class test how it went, they're going to tell you their hand hurt. Yeah. So it's still important to make sure you're writing.
Vali?
Thanks. Ray, you have an amazing array of offerings for clubs after school. What is the participation rate for clubs? And do teachers ever suggest to particular students, this club will be great for you? In a way, encouraging them to write more. There's a writing club. I mean, for those kids, is there ever something said to students to invite them in a personal way?
We would hope, right? Yeah, I would think there is. I've never gone and asked teachers, did you invite this kid? Did you, what are you doing for recruitment with it? I just know my own conversations with kids. Why aren't you doing this? Let's do this. Let's do that. And I imagine teachers are doing the exact same to try to get them, kids that they see interest in this. Why don't you come to the Rocket Club? This will be great. And I'll definitely check in with teachers because that's a great question, because I'm assuming, of course that happens, but, definitely I'll check in with teachers to make sure it really is. Because I think you're right on that.
Yeah, and participation numbers, do you have any idea what percentage of students actually stay after school?
So our biggest issue with clubs is we have such a high percentage of kids playing sports, which make clubs really hard. With that. Our numbers have not rebounded to where they were in 18-19. They absolutely have not. Our drama numbers are not what they were. Our band and chorus numbers are not what they are. Our writing club's not what it was. Our field hockey numbers are not what they were. The numbers have not rebounded back to where they are. We're definitely, want to see that increase and still offering all those things. So I don't know if I have a real good answer on how many, if I walk into writing club on an afternoon, I want to say there's between, there probably is on a given day, 6 to 10 kids in there. And, so this probably means there's probably 10 to 15 kids truly involved in the club, and half of them are coming each time, if I had to guess.
So do you think people are concerned about COVID still, or why are they not coming back? Or they just lost the training, like you say, they don't have
I think
the
it's
stamina
kind
to stay
of
after
lost
school.
that routine and lost that there. So one of the things that, really is a combination of getting kids involved and equity and all those mixtures in, and meeting with, Jen and Emily, and through an equity discussion, we talked about, the band, where our numbers are. And, one of the things that Jen brought up was in Portland, there's the option for the free instrument, more there. So I went and talked to Becky. I said, Becky, this is an option. What do you think about this? And Becky's like, make it happen. So like trying to do different things to increase those numbers to make, have less barriers up. So like when the mass landing letters went out, there was the option for the free instrument, if that's what, will get you in there, and we're going to pilot it there and see how it goes. So like, I think there's definitely efforts to make that out. Our ski numbers looked fairly similar to what they were. We just had signups today. Our boys basketball looked pretty similar. Our girls basketball has always been a little bit low, and it was still a little bit low. So I would say this, with the athletics in this winter, we're looking a little closer to where we were.
And one of the concepts that struck me from last week was the mention that clubs are an opportunity for kids to shine and take on leadership roles. I had never really thought about clubs in that way. I love that concept.
No, you're absolutely.
So now I want everyone to go to clubs.
No, and I will say, and I know Beth will know that she's heard me, ask for this many times in the budget, and it's come up as, we have a late bus to Pownell. It took us too long to get it, and I apologize for that, but we kept trying and trying. And it had been in the budget for the last couple of years, but we couldn't get enough bus drivers to make it work. And this year, there is a van that we leave at the middle school, and we have been every day run it to Pownell. And I would say that 75% of the days it goes to Pownell because there's a Pownell student that wants to access it. So, that's one of the really big things that bothered me, that we didn't have that for Pownell that we had for the Freeport kids. And, I feel really good about that opportunity so they can join clubs as well now.
One question that I had when you were talking about last year and the real importance of that tech coordinator, forgive me, are they still here? Do we still have that position, or have they transitioned?
So we don't have
else?
that position, and the person was previously a special ed teacher with us, but had left to another district. And when this came open, we recruited him back, and he has stayed on with us in a different position now.
Okay.
So it's worked out very well.
So the resource is still here. It's just
So the
has a different
resource is
name.
still here. And the reality is we had multiple teachers, that he was one of them, that have that ability. It's just freeing up the time to do it. If we take someone else from our school district, then we have to find a science teacher or a math teacher. If we take it from someone else's district, they have to find the replacement.
Well done on keeping it in the district.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ray? Maddie?
Thanks, Ray. A couple thoughts. It's not so bad being the last principal to go.
I think it's an advantage. I do. I said I wasn't sure which way, but I do think.
Well, I mean, because also when you said that, it made me realize in my 4 years here, I feel like we've come a really long way in terms of how we approach things, how you all approach things district-wide and take advantage of each other's learnings. And I love that. I love that we've been hearing similar things. Yeah. It feels like educational equity is happening throughout the district.
And I would say, having been here, this is, I don't know, since the start of the RSU, I would agree with that statement. I would say like K-12, this is the most we've ever been on the same page. And, we've continually grown in that way more recently.
It feels really evident to me that you
I would agree with you on that statement.
Working as a team. So kudos to you and to you, Becky, for leading that. That's really great. And thank you for mentioning the arts. Because, there are reasons why kids stopped doing drama and music last year. And I'm thankful that as a district we've championed those things. But, it's not as much fun, or it seems like it might not be as much fun if you're not under a spotlight on a stage or really doing the kind of cool tech, lighting and sound and props and all that you would do if you were putting on a show on the stage that these kids have seen people before go through. You're making a video. It's a thrill that they still got to do something, but it's different. And not being able to sing, not being able to play instruments the way they're used to. So one thing I would love to see, and I know this is happening in one respect, I'd love to see more opportunities for the younger kids to see the high school kids. And I know with the new Tri-M Music Honors Society that there's some efforts underway there. Bless you. And I think that the drama club from the high school is performing parts of the musical for the other schools next Wednesday.
So I know that our 7th and 8th graders are all going over there to see parts of the musical.
More of that, please. And,
Yeah.
and this is the moment where I have to say, wouldn't it be cool if we had an arts director?
Yeah. Yeah.
Say it every year till it happens.
And just so you know, like we did choose to do 7th and 8th grade, and really the choice was around, do we really want to put all of our unvaccinated kids into the one spot and then, be doing contact tracing on that and that. So like that, the choice, like we would have loved to included 6th grade, but that is the reason why we didn't do 6th grade.
Maura.
I wanted to thank you, Ray, and I guess this is where you also benefit from going last, because I heard all the wonderful things everyone else said too about your DEI work. So I'm so heartened to hear it, and I think it's just everything that is being done in all of our schools is so impressive, the way that you all just dove into that work, and I know it's difficult work, so I wanted to thank you for that. And then I had a question about the Building Equity Committee, and I don't know, maybe this is a question for Dr. Foley. How does that committee, if at all, interact with our district DEI committee? Maybe there's some learnings from your building committee that you and Jen have.
So I would say, my biggest connection to the district committee is my conversations with Dr. Foley and Jen. They're really the representatives, from the schools, and those are conversations that have with both of them, and so like. Information that's there that needs to be shared with the staff or shared with, or resources that are talked about there, or different ideas that are there, would come back in the committee that we have. I put it out to anyone that wanted to join, and we have, a number of teachers that have joined, and it's been really good.
Thank you.
And I would say I would love for that communication to be both ways, right? So I would think, the work that's going on in the equity committees in the schools, in the middle school and the high school, can certainly provide some feedback back up to the district committee. Like, it's easy to have these great ideas on high, but when it's about like, how does it actually, the tactical ground game, like how is it actually playing out in the schools? I think there's a lot of learning that can go both ways. So hopefully that's happening. Anybody else for Ray?
Time's up.
Time's up. All right. Thank you,
Thank you
Ray.
very much.
All right. And last but never least, community programs goal review. Peter Wagner.
Good evening, everyone. So just starting by taking a peek back at last year's goals for the 2021 school year. Last year, the two goals that I put forth focused primarily on adult education, that aspect of our operation, and also the recreation part of our program. And the year. The pandemic year was challenging for us. It was challenging for everybody here, each of our schools and everyone in them. Ours is a unique case because we don't, we're not compulsory. We're counting on people finding us and coming back to us now that things are hopefully on the better side of the pandemic. But it was a really good year in a lot of ways for us. And so looking at the first goal, I'll just call out a couple of things that I'm especially excited about and proud of. One is that through this year of pandemic, Katie Bezier, who's our fantastic adult ed coordinator, has done just a fantastic job for us. She spent a pretty good amount of time reaching out to students in our adult ed program who, for some reason, over the last couple of years had sort of faded away. People who stopped attending for one reason or another, many of them pandemic related. But she was able to directly contact 21 of our previous students who had not completed their high set if they were on that side of the house, or people who still could make good use and benefit from our English instruction. She was able to contact 21 of them, and we had 8 of them return to our program, which is just great. And I think there's hope for maybe even more of those to come back to us this year as well. I'd also like to call attention to some efforts that we made to introduce a couple of programs that would much more directly affect and have a positive impact on Freeport High School students. The proposition of adult education, I think, is easy sometimes for it to be just sort of binary. You're either successful in the high school environment or you're not, and if you're not, you come to adult education, and that's not the way it should be. It's certainly not the reality of the way things are, but we wanted to demonstrate that a little bit more by making contact with Freeport High School students and offering some things on that could really make a difference for them. And so the one thing that I would like to call out is a program that at one time was called the Summer Melt Program. And the reason it got that name, and I'll explain it to you very briefly, is that there are college-bound or college-aspiring students who, between graduation day in the spring of their senior year and August or September, when they're to report to college, something happens and they just don't make it. They don't make that jump. And so Summer Melt, our name for it here locally is POST, P-O-H-S-T, which is Post High School Transition Program. And again, Katie Bezier led this effort. We had great support from the team at the high school, the counseling team, Jen and Charlie, and Diane Q. We had this great support from the high school team of identifying students who, for one reason or another, they had concerns that, okay, this kid's going to graduate, they've got the goods to succeed at the college level, but we're worried about something happening in those summer months. They don't have the wherewithal to pull together all the applications and all of the things that they need to do to get themselves set for that next year. So they identified some of these students for us. We did some warm handoff meetings. Those counselors, the people who had the existing relationships with those high school students, made contact with them, explained the program to them, told them there was this opportunity to get some support from our office to help them get to college. And for those students who took them up on the offer, we had warm handoff meetings where we, in adult ed, plus the student, plus the counselor, just got together to say, okay, we're good to go on this, and here are the ways we're going to help in the timeline. And so we were able to fill that important gap of time. One of the things for me that really made it clear that this was going to be, or that it was time well spent, was looking at the guidance counselors here at the high school who were visibly relieved, because they felt, I think, they often feel that when a student leaves after graduation day, that they're kind of out of their hands. Their job and their professional responsibilities don't give them the opportunity to continue helping that student succeed. And so we've been able to fill that space. And I'm really happy to report that of the 13 students that Katie took on this summer, 11 of them made it to their first day of college. And so the way the program works is that we track them for a year or two, and just so we'll have some additional reporting opportunities in the future. But yeah, what these students had in common. All of them, I believe, or almost all of them, were our first generation college students. So they come from homes where, the language and the understanding of making it to college and the importance of additional education isn't necessarily spoken on a daily basis, and or they just don't have the wherewithal to have those conversations. They don't have the internet access. They don't have just the understanding of all the pieces that need to go into to getting ready for that. So that was a real success this year, and I'm looking forward to growing it in the coming year. And the other goal that I'd set forth last year, so again, Ray mentioned some of the happy side effects of the pandemic. One of the things that we benefited from in a huge way was an influx of some funding to build our outdoor recreation program. We were able to purchase 12 fat tire mountain bikes, about 24 cross-country ski kits with a full size range of boots for people to use and rent, snowshoes. We got all sorts of great stuff, and we were able to use that through the last year and even now, both for programs that we run and lead through community programs, but also just for individuals to rent the stuff and to go out on their own adventures. And so we were able to leverage those new assets and resources to get people out there and being healthy and active. So those were our 2021 goals. Before we move on to this current year, are there any questions or thoughts about those?
Jill.
Thank you for your presentation. I have to say, the post program, I am very pleased to see that you were so successful. I know that is such a need to follow those students and kind of give them an extra support. And I also think that this community supporting adult education is very, very important. Do you have adults coming from other communities accessing our program, and what does that look like with your numbers?
We do. So in this past year especially, we saw more folks from outside of the 3 RSU 5 towns than certainly in previous time that I've been here in the office and doing this work. We had a lot of folks from Yarmouth. So this past year, the average age of our student dropped considerably. We had many more younger students, 17, 18, 19 years old. Students for whom the remote learning experience that came about because of COVID just didn't work for them, and so they came to us to do the work. So Yarmouth was the greatest influx. That was the biggest difference, I think, from people outside of the district this year. We had, I think, 8 graduations, or I should say 8 people who completed their high set requirements in this past year. That's way more than I've seen in 3 or 4 years. And we have a pretty good and vibrant classroom right now as well. It's smaller than it was a year ago, but that's kind of the name of the game. It ebbs and flows, and we never know when they're going to come. But yeah, it's going well. Mm-hmm.
Jen.
So thanks, Peter, for going over those goals from last year. But just to echo what Jill said, I think just to say it again, because I think it's absolutely amazing. That post program, that 11 students, we're a small school, mm-hmm. and 11 students that ended up going to school that for some reason were thought of kids that would maybe fall through the cracks. And was this the first year that was really kind of a focus?
It's the first year that we have done it here. I can't say, Jen, how long the summer melt program has existed, but it's mm-hmm. it's been out there. I know that Portland has done it on at least one occasion, but we are test piloting to some degree. So it's new enough that there's not a whole lot of data from our hub partners out there. But again, the folks here at the high school who have the really close mentoring and trusting relationships with the students, they knew those who they were concerned about, and they had a really high hit rate on getting those students to agree to speak with us. And then again, out of the 13 who did, 11 made it to college. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased that we were able to be there.
I think we talk a lot about graduation rate, which I think is fantastic, and we do get those kids graduated. But this just speaks volumes about how we take care of after that, you know, and I'm not saying they're the same kids, but like it does piggyback on, you know, our commitment to graduate kids, but then our commitment to make sure even after they graduate that we continue to help them. So I think that's amazing. So
Great,
thank you.
thanks. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Katie Bezier, who manages that program. You know, she is the perfect combination of big sister, counselor, confidant, and she's just so thorough and organized, and she, you know, holds, you know, she held these students to expectations and really guided them through the process. Yes, please.
One more.
Oh,
hold on.
sorry. Yeah, sure.
I just have to piggyback on the praise on this because I was part of the dropout prevention committee when this sort of first came about, and I just, you know, remember thinking that it was just this amazing opportunity, and I was so glad that you guys were doing it, and I'm just so pleased to hear that you had such a great success rate for just, you know, the first year of doing it. So I just wanted to jump on that as well and just say thank you for sharing that, and it's very exciting.
Yeah,
So.
great. Thank you, Beth. Thanks.
How many did they identify? Just curious.
I think our list was somewhere between 25 and 30 altogether.
Okay.
So there were a good number of students who, when they were approached by their counselors, or
Politely
their
declined.
teachers, yes. Let's assume so. Yeah. So you know, it's possible that a good number of them did in fact make it, you know, make it to the next level if that's what they chose. But yeah, that would actually be a good point to follow up of those that were invited, but chose not to.
Because it's an interesting control group, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, on to
Great.
this year.
Okay, so for this year's goals, I have 2 points. Well, actually, one significant point to focus on, and then the second goal is just sort of building on the successes that we had this year program-wide. But the first goal, once again, is, my goodness, what would we do without the opportunity to benefit from COVID relief funds? Laugh and Learn, as many of you know, has been a little bit transient. It's gotten bumped around over the last couple of years, and for really good reason. I mean, again, we're an elective program. It's not a compulsory school day sort of thing, and the school population here in RSU 5 has exploded. And so when classrooms are needed for school children, we have to move. And my goodness, I think are on the verge of having a home of our own that will be insulated from you know, those sorts of variables. And so with COVID relief funds, we've been approved for a mobile unit that we're going to place at Mass Landing School, provided that all the permits and everything else comes through sometime in the 2022 calendar year. Hopefully, we will do everything we can to make sure that it's online for the next school year. And so yeah, we will have a place that we can make exactly as we want it to be and need it to be for licensing and for our various programs that we have for young children. Fenced in playground, traffic loop for drop off, a sign that actually says, you know, welcome to Laugh and Learn, you know, look like we belong. So that is incredibly exciting. So the goal is establishing a permanent home at Mass Landing School, and that we have this thing up and ready to go for the 22-23 school year. So that is again a really exciting opportunity for us, and it's just so great to think that we will have this place that's all our own. And then the second goal, as I mentioned, is really sort of building on some of the successes from this past year and just growing. Community programs will build on its growth and successes of the past 2 years and enhance its reach and professionalism across the program. Improving the effectiveness of core community programs offerings in adult enrichment, Laugh and Learn, and recreation programs. I'll mention that as good as things feel right now, our youth programs are full. Laugh and Learn is full. Our recreation programs are going full steam. Enrichment programs are doing great. So our younger participants are back, absolutely, and our adult ed classrooms are doing well. Adult enrichment is still really lagging, and that's something that is hitting all of our hub partners across Cumberland County. Every adult ed office is having trouble getting folks back into enrichment programs. So that's the place where we really want to focus our attention and our marketing and our resources to get those people back. And one of the things that we have considered, we've gone back and forth over the last year about vaccine requirements for taking part in classes, and we have viewed it to this point as something that might keep people away. But we're beginning to feel that maybe having that in place would make people feel more comfortable about attending. So that's not a done deal, but it's something that we are considering in a different way now. But we want to have more programs, fewer canceled programs in adult enrichment specifically. On the Laugh and Learn side of things, we've recently gone through our recertification. It's a 3-year deal with Maine Roads to Quality, and we would like to have our child care centers at Durham Community School and Moore Street elevated to Step 2. They're both at Step 1 right now, largely due to the fact that our staff, we've had so much transition and turnover with staff that they're relatively new to what they're doing. So the staff ratings are keeping us down there. Super high quality centers, super high quality program, but for MRTQ we're just rated as a 1 on a scale of 1 to 5. And something that is a relatively new discussion that I'm really excited about is building our program so that more Durham Community School, middle school aged students, 7th and 8th graders specifically, can take part. With the time differential of when Freeport Middle School gets out, their school day ends, and when Durham ends its day, it is really tricky to have a successful after-school program that all of those students, 7th and 8th graders, can take part in. And so the example that I've used a number of times with Becky, and as we've talked about this with Will Pidden, is a tennis class that we did, a tennis program that we did this fall. And we heard, as we always do, from a couple of families in Durham who said, "Oh goodness, I want my son or my daughter to be a part of that, but it's starting before they can get there. Like, is there anything you can do about that?" And if you move the timing back so that Durham can take part, then it ceases to be an after-school program for the students in Freeport, which makes up the bulk of the program. And then we're also sort of beholden to the schedules of the people who are instructing the classes, coaching the classes, that they have a schedule that they want to be on. So anyway, all of this to say, we have worked out an agreement where for programs that we offer in the after-school time in Freeport, that those students can gain approval 1 day a week to leave school on the early bus. That is it safe to call it the athletics bus that goes from Durham to Freeport, and take part in our programs in Freeport. So that's good news. We're going to be able to have programs here in Freeport that will include Durham students in a more meaningful way. And then we also, just generally speaking, want to offer more programs, after-school programs in Durham that can that children in that school can benefit from. So those are an important part of our youth goals for the year. And then I want very much to grow the post program. We want to have a higher hit rate on students that we make it to that we get to that first warm handoff meeting, and continue to see that grow and benefit more students. And I'm really excited to track this year's first batch and see how they did in their first year of college.
Maura. Thanks, Peter. It's always great to hear about what's going on in community programs. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you talk more about the MRTQ rating? I'm just not familiar with that. Thanks.
Sure. So there are a number of measurements that are taken of a licensed childcare program, and across the 5 different measuring categories, a center, any specific center, has a score that is equivalent to its lowest rating in any of those 5 categories. So if in in the cases of Durham and Moore Street School, we rate very highly in 4 of the categories, but in staff training, we're somewhat low. And because of that, we get that lowest rating as overall for the center. So so we do have strategies for increasing professional development opportunities for our staff, and it should be noted that with the new Laugh and Learn Center, that will be ours. I think that part of the trouble we've had with staff turnover is that there's also it feels like there's a lot of uncertainty. It has felt over the last couple of years like there's a lot of uncertainty in the program because it's been moved and moved and moved. This will give us some permanence, not just in terms of place, but I think it will improve our the length of tenure for our staff as well. So I think that will really help. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm glad we don't grade our students that way. That's terrible. Like
Yeah,
your lowest grade
yeah.
becomes your rating overall.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah. The good news, I think, Michelle, is that it doesn't necessarily hurt us. It puts us in a position where maybe we don't qualify for certain funding and some additional benefits that we might get in our bottom line and just resources from the state and such. But I would argue to the end of the day that it doesn't a 1 rating doesn't reflect on the quality of our program. Yeah. But we have some for those two centers, we know that we can get it to a 2. I don't know if we'll ever get it to a 3, but it's a good goal to try to have it as high up as we can get it.
So one question I had on the new home for Laugh and Learn is, what's the capacity, and does that meet? Is it more than what we're able to accommodate now? Is there growth room?
Right. So Dennis Willett is working on sourcing a mobile unit for us, and so until we know for sure what we're purchasing, I can't answer that for sure. My understanding or the knowledge that I'm operating on right now is it will be no smaller than the one that's over just right over here behind the scoreboard at Moore Street School. So that's, I think, essentially a double wide, 2 classrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, and we will. If it's no smaller than that, which I've been led to believe will be the case, we won't have any problem with capacity, and it might even be bigger.
Colin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. And I'll just echo all of the enthusiasm about the successes with the post program. It's just really exciting. And I guess just to ask a little bit more about that, what are the strategies that you're using to identify and then approach and then engage those students, and I guess what have you noticed has been successful, and what are you hoping to try out this next year?
Sure. So the first engagement and the first approach really comes from the relationships that are already established between the counselors and the social workers and people like Diane Q here at the high school. So they have really close relationships with these students for 4 years. They know what they're about. They know where they're from, and the challenges that they face. So that group really pulls on those personal relationships to create that initial list. And I don't anticipate this part will be any different. Based on that, the knowledge that they possess and the relationships that they possess, that really is that's the most logical, and I think gives us the best chance of success for that to be the first contact that happens with the students. And then of the 13 that we did successfully recruit in that way, persistence is kind of the name of the game. So we started this program, I believe March were the first of the warm handoff meetings that we did, and Katie really had to persevere to make that first contact with these students. Say, okay, I know it's March, graduation's 3 months off, which seems like a long way, but it's going to be here soon, and then there are going to be deadlines for your college applications and for other things you need to do. So it really was just a lot of patience and a lot of a lot of texting, and finding ways to communicate with 17 and 18-year-old students is, it can be tricky, but so that's not a great answer to your question. I mean, the strategy is to stick to it and just keep at it. Now, that being said, we also have considered the possibility that maybe we started too early. So maybe March is a little bit too early. Maybe we talk about doing this like right after April break, and when the kids get back from April vacation, then things start to feel a little more real. So maybe that will just streamline the process a little bit. Portland does theirs later than we did it this year. So that might be one of the adjustments we make.
I think persistence is always an excellent strategy.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Particularly with young people.
Yeah.
Vali.
Thank you, Peter. I also want to echo the just admiration for having gotten these kids into college through the summer. Now, is the program free?
It is.
Okay, good.
Yep.
And I also wanted to commend you on the fact that I flipped through all the catalog for the fall, and my 6th grader is eligible for most of your after-school programs, which didn't used to be the case. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Great.
And I hear great things about the teen treks.
Yes.
So I just also wanted to give you feedback from out here on the street as a friend of a 6th grader.
Yeah.
Very much enthusiastic about all the changes that
Excellent.
now allow 6th graders to participate.
Thank you. No, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, Chris Garrett, our recreation coordinator, does a fantastic job with Teen Treks. And then I'll also just let everyone know, and anyone watching at home, that the new catalog will be in mailboxes next week. And we have a really exciting winter program coming from November to February. So looking forward to having that out on the street. Registration's available now, too, so you go to our website and everything's up there to go.
Because we just got the email about it, right, this week?
Yes,
I was going to say, I feel like I just saw it. Yep.
That's right, yep.
So one quick question about the catalog. Does it have something that says that people can rent equipment?
Yes,
in
we
the
do.
catalog?
Yes,
Okay.
we do have that in there.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other question? Oh, Jill.
I'm sitting here and for a few weeks we've been, talking about the work with, inclusion. And like when we bring that down to a local level, I've also heard tonight that our Region 10 kids kind of get to miss out on the, advisory period. That, Durham after school stuff is hard in the rec program, and Pownell, the kids didn't have a bus for a while. I just think we talk about big world issues and conversations. I just want to, as a board, that we are made aware and pay attention to those small world issues in our communities, because I think for me, if any kid wanted to do something and they couldn't because there wasn't a bus, I think that is a really strong message that you're not included, and you're going to be transitioning to a place where you can be with all these kids who got to do. So I think as a board member, I want to be more aware of these things than trying to pull them out of these presentations.
I really appreciate that as well, because there's, in my mind, there's no worse outcome for our programs than finding out that someone can't access it for something that isn't just because it's a day that they can't attend or something like that. Yeah. So, we absolutely want to be able to serve everyone in the 3 towns, at least equally, for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think what you'll find, Jill, as we go through, your first budget process, a lot of the asks and what we're looking to add potentially, you'll see them tied back to these goals. You'll see them like, this is an equity issue and this is why we're requesting it. And, it's really one of the reasons that we really started these goal presentations several years back, was because we were getting requests at budget time, and we're like, we didn't even know this was an issue. We didn't even know. Or we would get requests that weren't really tied to what we felt the goals of the board were. So now, you see their goals, you'll see them now, you'll see them again when they do an update later in the year. And then pretty much every ask, when they go through the budget process as the administrative team, and then when it gets to us, is, very few of them are just, because we think it's a good idea. It's like, hey, this is the goal that this targets, and this is how it moves us forward. So I hope you'll find you'll see that connection. Vali.
I want to echo that, and I want to not only say absolutely agree with your point of view and the fact that equity should be visible everywhere, even the small little things, but what's encouraging, having been on the board for a few years, is that that's exactly what we're doing. So the fact that now we have administrators coming and saying, hey, we noticed there wasn't equity here and we're addressing it and this is what we're doing to resolve it, has been huge, and it's happening every year more and more so. So I really appreciate all the work that everyone's doing, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to be on the lookout.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Peter? Thank you, Peter.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So we are going to move through what? Yes. Oh, Candy, sorry.
Board comments. I just wanted to let you know a couple things about Region 10. It's going on right now.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. So we don't, because this is our workshop meeting, or the other way around.
Okay.
So it's every other meeting, we'll do the report out on the committees. So on our next one, we should have that one. You'll see, it'll be listed over there on the agenda. I know it's confusing that it's on here, but it's listed as NA. So I apologize for that confusion. But definitely want to make sure that, and I'll try and remember at our next meeting to make sure we come to you for an update on the Region 10. Maddie.
Maybe it would be helpful if we had the agenda differentiated as a business meeting and a workshop meeting, because I have only just caught on to that. You know, I've been like, oh, I need to make a comment at this meeting. Oh, I can't. I have to wait another 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the NA is for. So if it's we try to keep the agenda consistent so it doesn't change meeting to meeting. We can try and do that. I'm not sure that would help me because I never remember which one's which, where we talk and when we don't. I'm sure Ginny will be texting me tonight to tell me. But yes, maybe there's a better way to communicate that on our agendas. So, but yes, definitely want to hear the update on Region 10. So we don't have a policy. We don't have any unfinished business tonight, but we do have that agenda, adjustment to the agenda for the under new business.
And so we were able to reach out to see if there are sample policies just as a first step. And Cynthia was able to get that from MSMA. So there is a sample policy around, I think it's just titled memorials for either staff or students. So I think this is just that we're wanting to have a quick discussion to see if that's the will of the board, to move that to policy, to see us kind of adopt a policy on that.
Yeah, it sounded like there was a comment last week that maybe the best place for this to start would be with the policy group. So it sounds like there is a sample policy that the policy committee could start working with, but we just wanted to make sure that the general consensus of the board was that we wanted them to take that on because they have lots of other stuff on their plate. So if everybody doesn't, or not, the majority of people don't feel like that's, rising to the top of the pile, then we won't push it to them. But if folks do think that that's worthy of their time, then we can give them that instruction. John.
Oops. I absolutely think that I'd like to see that. I think from the past explanations we were given, there was a huge kind of vary of what's gone on in Freeport or in the RSU. So I think even if we're taking out, anything that's been discussed personally about what's in a memorial, I think we need to move forward as a district to have a policy.
Bali?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very important that we be proactive about this. The recent episode with a student dying and not having the ability to put a memorial in his name, where they're having other memorials on campus, all the different campuses, has been very painful for a lot of people in the community. So I think having an explicit policy explaining why we may act one way or another and then we treat everyone equally is super important.
Maddie?
Yeah, I would like to take this on the policy committee as well. I'm not sure where I'm landing. I feel like I don't have on this particular issue that we're hearing from the community about. I feel like I have very little information on the face of it. What's been shared with us, I think I can understand why the philosophy exists about memorials that's been shared with you, Dr. Foley. But I guess I would ask, first of all, I think the correct place for this to live is in policy. Like, let's not deal with this issue by issue. Let's set policy. But I would ask that the policy committee and probably the whole board would like access to some of those, more access to those materials, or the Centers for Grieving Children, you know, the information that's been shared. If there's anything online or any articles, it would be helpful for me as a policy committee member to look through that.
So one of the suggestions that Cynthia came up with is that maybe we could even invite one of the speakers to the policy meeting from the center. So that could help. When I thought that was a great suggestion. That could help as the policy committee first grapples with that before bringing it to the board.
Vali?
Yeah, and Maddie, after we got on the conversation going, I did just do a simple Google search on student memorial policy, and there is a wealth of information on the internet.
Jen?
As to what Maddie said, if it was possible just to share what there is for a sample policy that you'll be starting with from the MSA, or the one you just said that exists. Is there a sample?
There is a sample, and I'm not sure that's how we've done it before, but I'm open to whatever the board is wanting on this.
I don't see any harm in sharing that sample with the board. I mean, because if they have thoughts, I mean, it might complicate things for us a little bit, but I mean, if they have thoughts, we have been, I mean, before I was on the policy committee, we were dealing with the class size policy, and I remember going to some of those meetings as a non-committee member. So I wanted to hear about it, and I wanted to be prepared to provide my feedback. So I think, that lends greater transparency and frankly could give us a little less back and forth if we if it all happens here at a meeting, that could be lengthy and not very productive.
And I would also say that, the other thing that's helpful, I mean, the policy committee does a lot of work on a lot of policies, good work through the year, but there are certain ones that people tend to be more keyed into. So when those make it to the policy agenda, maybe it's just better to let the board know. And so, if that's of interest to you, then you can plan on attending that policy committee meeting. So I'm not really hearing any sort of concern about moving this to policy. Am I reading the room correctly here? Okay.
I just have one clarifying question because we don't normally. So normally the first time that the policy committee sees the sample policy is when you present it, right? And I just want clarification. We do have it. I mean, we're not trying to keep it secret. I hope I'm not coming across that way. But if you want me to mail it, do we want to do something different than what we normally do? Like, do you want to all see it sooner rather than later? Because I think I've said to Cynthia that I think she's going to have to talk to the policy committee about adding a couple of meetings.
Jen,
just because I brought it up about having it earlier. What I guess I really was looking more for is, I guess procedurally, how is it going to get presented? Is it going to go to the policy committee? They create a policy that they bring to us, and we start there.
There's a policy on that?
No, I know, right?
Sorry.
So I'm just wondering if like the sample policy, they would share with us on the day that you also bring what their ideas.
So basically, you want to see the comparison between what the sample is and what's being brought to
and
us.
kind of like where that went, like how that started here and ended up in what they're presenting with us. So I guess that if that all happens on the same night and it's all laid out, that's fine. I mean, I was just thinking I wouldn't want to have the policy committee come present their policy that they came up with, but then we don't really have any kind of the backstory. So.
Gotcha. Beth.
Isn't that kind of what we do on first read? Like we see what's already written and then whatever's highlighted is what you've added?
No, because
No.
we see based on our existing policy.
First read is with
Okay.
whatever changes we've made.
Right.
Okay.
So it's not necessary, because we don't have a policy on this now. So it
Right.
would be
Gotcha.
brand new. So it
Okay.
would all be, highlighted. Or
Thank you.
And for those who want to attend the first meeting of the policy committee, they can do so too. So no one has to wait until the policy committee brings the first draft to us.
Cynthia, when is it that you're thinking it will come to the policy committee?
So tomorrow morning, 7
Friday
a.m.
morning?
So we had this discussion a little earlier today. So we have a meeting Friday
Right.
that's very booked, and then then we have that first meeting in December. That first week, we have the lawyer, the two lawyers coming for that Title IX presentation. Remember, we booked, so that's full. So sometime between this Friday and before Christmas, I'm going to suggest that we look at a calendar to add a day somewhere in there. So we'll collaborate Friday to pick a day, perhaps. And so that's my current thinking.
And then maybe Becky can just include whatever that date is in one of your updates to the board. So, Maddie.
Maybe we could recruit another member of the committee in the meantime.
So on our next board, well, Lindsay. Yeah. So one of the yeah. So on our next agenda, we will have board committee assignments reshuffling, because we have a couple of openings with Lindsay and Jeremy's departure. Near and dear to Beth and my heart is the finance committee, which is which is required to have somebody from each town on it. So we definitely. So Maddie, I think, just volunteered. I think you'd be great at it.
I think you should.
So so that will be on the next agenda. So hopefully we can beef up the policy committee, get some folks on finance. This is what happens when you don't come to a meeting. You get nominated and elected to committees. Little did he know. So we'll definitely tackle that at our next board meeting to make sure that all of our committees are appropriately staffed and ready to go. So, you have what you need?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we are back to public comment. So this is our second public comment opportunity. So if you have anyone who'd like to speak, now would be your opportunity. So we just ask that you come up, give us your name, where you're from, and comments are 3 minutes.
My name is Bob Stevens. I'm from Freeport, and I want to thank you, I guess a number of years later, for having appointed me to the Sustainability Committee, which I've enjoyed working on with Dr. Foley and other members of it. And I think some interesting ideas have been brought to you as a result, and I think we're hoping to have other ideas to bring to you as well. Particularly, as we all know, this world has changed dramatically as far as what it's going to look like 20 and 30 years from now, and I'm sure it particularly impresses you because your focus is on children and the future of those children. So there are a number, I think, that are sort of realizing we can't keep our heads in the sand, and we think it's probably going to require a lot of action. Different places in town, perhaps in our own lives, but also in our institutions that we depend upon, like the school system and all. So we're going to be looking for some ideas, hopefully to bring to you through the Sustainability Committee, and see if the world is going to become an electric world, basically, and it's going to be a huge jump. It's going to mean budget is going to be difficult because it's something that we haven't really had to face in the same way that we have before. And so we'll work on day-to-day things, year-to-year things, and it's really hard to jump to a generation-to-generation things. And I think that's what you're probably going to be hearing more about from us. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, and thank you for your work on the Sustainability Committee. It is really, really important work, so we appreciate not only our board members that participate, but also our community members. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, so I would take a motion to adjourn. Jill and Vali, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed. That was our first vote of the day, just saying.
To adjourn.
It's a workshop, that's true. All right, thank you guys.